Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman, and you are watching another book review. Today, I'm bringing a very old book written in the 1st century BC by none other than Julius Caesar, that great conqueror and dictator for the Roman Republic. This was a book originally written in Latin in the 1st century BC. It has been translated into many languages. I read a translation that was done in the early 1900s, but there are different translations out there. There are 8 volumes or 8 books in the Gallic Wars. That is the book that I will be talking about. Julius Caesar also wrote about the Civil War and the war in Alexandria, and I haven't read those, so I will bring you the book report on those, book review on those in the near future. So why did I decide to read this? Well, I came from a very humble public education background where I didn't really pay attention in history class. I sort of gathered that there was this grand Roman Empire that spanned many, many centuries, and I knew that Julius Caesar was a prominent figure. I knew that Shakespeare had written about him. We all know that name, Caesar. It's synonymous with a dictator. But, you know, I never really knew a lot of the details about him. I didn't know the details about the war other than watching what you see in movies like Spartacus or Gladiator, and I don't even think he was necessarily in those movies. So I am going to talk about this lovely, very old book, the commentaries, Julius Caesar's commentaries on the war in Gaul or the Gallic Wars. So this is the conqueror's point of view. This is not the point of view from the people who are being conquered, the people who are fleeing for their lives, the people who are having their wives and their children enslaved, or even worse, butchered, who have lost the dignity of their ancestors' renown in valor and battle. I'm talking about the Gauls. This is a story of a tribes of people known as the Gauls spreading around parts of Switzerland, France, Belgium, parts of Germany on the side of the Rhine River nearest Italy. All of these people that the Italians at that time, the Romans, referred to as the Gauls, who had a proud history of being powerful warriors, of being strong, of having liberty, of being conquered, and not only conquered, but just so systematically conquered by this chess master, this strategist, this undaunted conqueror known as Julius Caesar. Wherever Caesar went, the Gauls were in terror. I mean, he just... Now, I should mention, this is a commentary written by Julius Caesar after he was victorious. I mean, God only knows how skewed we might write our own history. But it seemed like a fairly objective. It seemed fairly objective because he is often complimenting his foes, complimenting them when they fight courageously, and also condemning them when they are reckless with their strategies. He mentions the Gallic temperament. The Gallic way of life is very easy to get into a battle, but also very easy to give up. The Gauls, perhaps they were barbarians to the civilized Romans. They didn't have the advanced engineering works. They did not have the discipline within their ranks. They didn't have a lot of the things that made the Roman armies, the Roman legions under Julius Caesar so successful. But they had ferocity, they had size, they had pride. And these Gauls, who are along these 8 books within this massive commentary on the Gallic Wars, these Gauls from tribe to tribe are constantly trying to rally their people, trying to conspire, trying to regain the renown that they were once known for. And it is, as you're reading, it seems almost like a hopeless struggle. There are a few key points where this great Gallic leader comes and really unites them, and they all know that if they are not victorious over the Romans, it means enslavement, it means a loss of their liberty, it means the dishonor of their ancestors. So these Gauls are not only fighting for their lives, but they're fighting for the freedom of their children, for the freedom of their children's children. They're fighting also for their ancestors, the stakes that are at play. And the Romans are fighting for high stakes as well. If they cannot secure this province, maybe there will be barbaric incursions into their own lands. Maybe their own people might not be safe. And they're also fighting for money, for wealth, for power. I mean, it's ferocious as you're reading this. It's almost, because the book is largely, it's not so much about the history of Rome or the history of Gaul, or necessarily even the biography of these characters. There's little tidbits of the Gallic way of life, this tribe's way of life. This tribe is closer to Rome, and because this was a very interesting point that I really enjoyed, because this tribe was close to Rome, they had more access to merchants, to trading, to luxury, so they were more effeminate, weaker. This theme that Julius Caesar brings up and up again about the levels of ferocity of the Gallic armies that he's going up against. The closer they are to Rome, the more the more civilized they are, the more accustomed they are to contrivances of Rome and the civilized world, and the more rural they are, the more far out away from civilization, the more isolated they are. And some tribes he describes as actually closing their borders to trade, refusing to imbibe of wine or use conveniences at that time. These were the bigger, stronger, more ferocious, more valorous armies that he had to fight. And I love that theme, because we in the 21st century, and perhaps for the last several hundred years, or perhaps even for longer, we have idolized luxury, we've idolized convenience, we've idolized our technology, and it is great. It makes life so easy, makes life so comfortable. But, you know, some people might say that we are perhaps the weakest generation of man in the history of our species. And so in this Gallic Wars, the commentaries on the war in Gaul by Julius Caesar, he has these reflections on the various tribes, dependent upon how close they are. Julius Caesar also talks about their religion. The Druids are an elite priest or shamanic class that has a great sway over all of the decisions of the Gauls, and it talks about a lot of the human sacrifices or effigies of humans that are burned in sacrifice, and that the Druids, in order to get the real pure Druidic teachings, have to go to Britain. It's really very interesting. A lot of the things that you've heard about, a lot of the things that you've seen in movies, you are getting a first-hand view through the eyes of Julius Caesar and all of that he knows through whatever information networks were available to him at that time. And it's not really about that, about the ethnography or about religion. It's mostly about war, about how the armies line up, how the armies maneuver, what strategies are employed, the levels of courage, the morale, the fear, the time of day, the fortifications. And you see throughout, again and again, although the Gauls do sort of improve in their methods of making war as it goes on, just adapting to what the Romans are bringing. The Romans are just always one step ahead. The Romans may not beat the Gauls perhaps in knowing the land, but they just know how to root out the opposition. They know how to, sorry, it's a very windy day. there was construction noise at my apartment, and I wanted to find a quiet place, but here I have the wind on this river in Taiwan. First time to sit down here, I really like this place. You might see more videos here. Back to the story. Just that the Romans were just so systematic, so organized, and also the importance of leadership, the importance of people who made the right decisions, whether to march that day, perhaps into an ambush where your whole army could get routed or your corn supplies ransacked. There is a lot of mention of corn. I have never read the word corn so many times in a book. Caesar is always concerned about the corn supply. Will he have enough corn for his armies? And he talks about some of the German tribes and some of the wild Gallic tribes who do not do agriculture, or they don't plant crops. They only husband sheep, or they hunt, and so they're wilder, stronger. And some of these tribes look down on this puny stature of these Italian Romans, but the Romans know how to fight. The Romans are better equipped. They're not as fast, but they're better equipped. They fight in formation, and there's just a strict discipline. And also the Romans are always making the right decision of cutting off water supplies, burning all the farms. They're ruthless. A lot of this is heartbreaking to read when you realize that this is not Lord of the Rings you're reading, and these are fictitious orcs being slaughtered or elves being butchered, which is sad enough to kill an elf or an orc, but these are real humans. These are real people from our own DNA, or perhaps their DNA didn't continue, unfortunately, or fortunately. I don't know. I don't want to get judgmental about this, but there was a lot of death, and it makes you realize just how bloody our history was. But the boy in me, the boy that loved to read about knights, the boy that loved to read about warriors, the boy that loved to read about battle, the boy that loved conquerors. I think a lot of young boys grow up with a fascination for armies and swords. I mean, that boy was very happy because it was just epic battles throughout this entire tale, and the stakes were so high. It's not like in basketball or football where the winner gets a ring and the loser gets, the loser goes home and maybe gets booed. In these wars, which it feels like a sport between men, but it's war, but it's like everything's at stake. It's not just honor, it's the lives and the freedom of your entire tribe. Children being massacred, old people being massacred. It is bloody, bloody, bloody. And it is good to know that is a spider's coming down, a green spider coming down. He's on my microphone, but he hasn't made it in front of the lens, so I'm going to let him be for now. It is a good thing to read about history. It is also very tough. There were times where as I was reading it, almost just about the drama of the battles, of the characters, of these maneuvers. Spider should be gone. I was entranced, fascinated, but then I would have these moments where my humanitarian side really felt the what it must have been like to be there, and it's horrific, very, very horrific. War, which seems to be a part of our species, where just we want to have what you got, so we're gonna take it. And Caesar, he keeps writing that he's known for his clemency, his allowance for surrender. But every time a tribe would surrender, they'd have to give hostages. They'd have to give their children to Rome to keep as safe, just as an insurance that they wouldn't start a war. So, and then, you're paying money and you don't have freedom. So it's either you fight to retain your freedom and not have to be in service or a vassal to this greater power, Rome, or you face them and most likely get conquered, butchered, wiped out. Sometimes they just wipe people out to make an example. and make the other tribes scared, or enslaved. And then I would say, well, you know what? But then there was a little description of how the Gauls lived, and I guess the common Gaul was treated not much better than a slave. I mean, it was just a hard way of life, guys. It was a hard way of life unless you were perhaps a well-to-do Roman citizen, or perhaps a druid, or one of the knight class of the Gauls. I know life isn't always easy today in the 21st century. There are the haves and the have-nots. There always have been the haves and the have-nots. But one thing that you will get from this book is that life today is a lot less dramatic than it used to be, and it's a lot more equitable than it used to be, and it's a lot less scary in terms of physical violence than it used to be. That's what I like reading history. It kind of gives you, not only shows you where you come from, it's good to know where your roots are, or at least a part of the roots of the massive tree of humanity. But it's also good to know where humanity's at today and compare it. I don't think we really live quite as on the line as these people. I mean, these people who are fighting for their freedom, these Gauls, I mean, they were willing to burn their cities down, their houses down, and just run off into the forest with nothing, almost nothing, just so that the Romans couldn't get to them. Just so the Roman armies wouldn't have corn. Caesar's crazy about corn to get to them. I mean, the sacrifices that these people made, the courage, the valor. There's so many great quotes about the power of courage. It makes the most difficult things easy when you have sufficient courage. And some of these feats that these soldiers are doing is just like Legolas or some of the heroes from Lord of the Rings. Also the power of fortune, how just these fortuitous events could conspire to help this tragedy from being averted, or this would-be bloody war resolve itself so easily. The power of fortune. There's some really good gems of nuggets of the way Caesar thought about some things. I'm not condoning Julius Caesar's actions. I'm not condoning this type of life, but it is a type of life that a lot of our ancestors did come from. Caesar invades Britain. I mean, and the ingenuity of his engineers, and even Caesar himself to come up with ideas of building bridges and how to modify ships. Always a lot of problem solving. It really gives you an insight into how, as today we're constantly problem solving, building new solutions digitally or materially, that our ancestors were doing this as well on very basic things, building tunnels under walls and making ships able to navigate certain shallow waters. I mean, very fascinating stuff. Very fascinating stuff, guys. That's why I just wanted to talk about the commentaries on the Gallic Wars, or the War in Gaul by Julius Caesar. I will bring you his other works as I read them, and I hope the wind wasn't too bad, and I thank you for watching. My name is Ryan Freeman. I will see you next time. Bye.